going on. Did Chandra tell you about the rest of the Thomas crew? Alita is stuck in Mesquite because the gorge is flooded again. And she can't get through the gorge. She's trying to make it the long way around, but if she has to go clear to Panaca around, I don't think we'll see her. Mecca has had the flu. Her family has had the flu for 2 days. They're trying to think that they're going to feel good enough to come to the Dutch oven dinner tonight. Patty is trying to put together the salads that the John Thomas family is doing for the dinner because of all the hoo-ha. And Aunt Lavella and Rex are going to try and make it up for the history, but if nothing else, we'll see them at the Dutch oven dinner, we hope. You know, isn't that how it goes? All right. Do you guys have any questions about the old rock house or questions about Grandma, Grandpa? You know, we got talking to Richard earlier and Art, and you know, the last time I really remember getting together as the Thomas family was when I was 8 years old and Grandpa died. That means half of you guys weren't even born, you know? And so if there are questions, please feel free to ask or...
So how many of you remember the cellar just out the south door? With the big door that folded up and then the other door?
The root cellar.
That's where Grandma kept all of the fruit and everything.
Thought it was for dead people.
Yeah.
Well, it was old and rickety by the time you come along, buddy, and so it was scary. In fact, it did cave in, and Anne Marie had it buried. You know, she just buried it and whatnot several years ago.
Well,
so
Mom
there's a good memory.
Mom will be glad to hear that, because you're not talking about this one then, huh?
The root cellar, yeah,
You are or are not?
I am talking
Well,
about
Mom
that.
will be glad that it was Anne Marie or whoever you
Uh-huh.
said. She blamed Herbert for getting a tractor and covering that up, and Mom wanted something.
A
like
creamer
Something.
pop
bowl?
off of the separator or something. Yeah.
Grandma and Grandpa, again, they had milked these cows, and they had a separator. And on the top of that thing was a bowl that I imagined now in my adult mind, but in a child's mind, that thing seemed to be about that big.
They're pretty big.
And they'd crank it again, and they'd get whirling that thing too hard. But out of one spout would come the cream, and out of the other spout would come the skim milk, and they would feed the milk to the pigs in whatever combination. Back to you, Marie.
Okay.
Doug forgot
All
one
right.
thing about that though. Grandpa would take you out there with him to milk, and he'd say, "Come over and look at this." And you'd go and he'd say, "You ever seen the star in a cow's teeth?" And in the face, he could even
And he'd squirt the milk out.
squirt you.
And the cats.
Yeah, the cats would sit there and he'd just go lick it away.
Did Grandma ever go, put your finger in Jack's hole?
No.
Really? She got me.
All the time.
Put your finger in Jack's hole. I go, what?
Jack's
Put your finger in
not
Jack's
hole.
hole. And she
You're gonna pull it out. And her little giggle. And one last thing, you know, we were talking about all the things that she did in her older age, went on the mission and everything. She was my kid's babysitter and would play, was it Uno or Phase 10 with them? Anyway, she was my babysitter for lots of years. So she would have been 75-ish or something, you know, and she'd come and she'd get down on the floor with the kids. I mean, you know, age was just not a problem.
Does anybody
Where'd you
know
give her
what that
wallet?
is?
Oh, I should have brought that. I have her.
Huh?
Everybody still in town, refers to it as, where's your Grandma Thomas purse? She had a little black coin purse, and it went right there. Yeah.
This was Grandpa Thomas's favorite tool, and I don't know if anybody knows what he done with it, but that's how he fed his cows all fall long, was with that right there. He'd get permission from anybody for their garden, and he'd go and get a hold of a whole stalk of corn, and then he'd just and take it off right.
I'm
that
sure glad
far-
you didn't let that
I was. That far off of the ground, then he'd just take and do all of the guys' corn like that, and he'd stack it up. And then back in those days, they sorted potatoes by hand, and they'd have culled potatoes, they called them. It's same thing with the little rotten spot or whatever. So he'd get pickup loads of them, and then he'd throw that corn down in straw, and then put potatoes on top of it.
Tell them
Feed
about
his cows.
the potatoes.
What
They
about?
couldn't eat the potatoes raw because they'd get caught in the cow's throat.
You'd hear them doing that all the time.
And I wondered if I was having a problem. And so what he did is he took the top of a granary. It must have been 12, 14 foot in diameter. Do you remember it
I
enough?
just thought that was for pig slaughter.
And he took and turned this thing upside down and fixed it so it wouldn't leak. And he'd pour potatoes in there, the culled potatoes. I guessed about 5 pickup trucks, the old Ford 6-foot long bed. And he'd go and shovel those into there. And then they would get a fire started, you know, wood and straw, whatever,
Tires, whatever.
gasoline. But then they'd put old worn out tires underneath the ridge of that, and he'd, in essence, boil them. And eventually,
Alita made it. The gorge was close.
Well,
Yes.
we have a little water this morning, but we're not. We flow
Good.
well.
Right.
come and have a seat somewhere.
We're good.
But you'd boil those until you could eat them like a boiled potato. You'd take it right out of there and peel off the peel. Some people didn't, I did. And you'd just eat those along with the pigs. But the pigs and the cows would eat those that way because he didn't want them to choke.
Anybody know what that is? He had a lucerne patch, he called it. We called it alfalfa, but it was lucerne. And he'd always go out and take that and cut bunches of that to feed. Sometimes he fed it to the chickens, you know, or to whatever, but I've seen him cutting with this, even along like ditch banks here in town or whatever, just cutting the grass, the rye and whatever with it, and throwing a pickup load in that, so.
Most
He
people
was
call
very-
it a Kaiser blade, I call it a sling blade.
That's a lawnmower blade.
That's true. Well, while we're on taking advantage of anything and everything and along every ditch bank, when I was younger and Grandpa had kind of finished the ranch, he ran what was called the turkey brooders, and we can also go out there and there's just a little piece of it left, but there used to be
5-ish.
6, I thought there were 6, but 5 long kind of Quonset hut type looking buildings, you know, and they were clear full of baby chicks, turkey chicks, and then bigger and bigger and bigger, and he took care of those, and we'd get to go out there and he'd take his sickle and he'd whack down the weeds. Well, Raynel and I would go out with him and we got to feed the baby turkeys and it was just really quite an adventure. And he had an old pickup and we'd ride in the back and he always had the tailgate down. I decided that I would just have a whole lot of fun one day. And he drove like all old people do, up the road. And so I jumped out and ran behind. Nothing happened until we got to the rock house. And then the weeds that he had whacked down, he took across the back of my
Batista.
hiney. Yeah. And told me I was never to jump out the back of a pickup again. He let me have my fun, but he punished me for what I had done. And I don't remember ever jumping out the back of the pickup again, but
I remember we told Mom, and she says, then I'd have spanked you too.
yeah.
How many of you know where Grandpa Thomas passed away at? Was it in the hospital?
Nope.
was just barely made it out of the door of their turkeys. And he took nitro pills and he tried to get them. They were scattered on the ground, but he was laying there by his truck. And if he'd have done that
My mother-
inside the brooder, them turkeys would have ate
Would have
him.
eaten him.
My mother made that statement with tears in her eyes that she would always be grateful that Grandpa didn't die in with the turkeys because they'd start with his eye. Why did I say his eye? Because he had a false eye. Does anybody know how he lost his eye? Went hunting on Sunday. From
Didn't wanna talk
from
about
that
that.
time on, he demanded that we not shoot a gun on the Sabbath day. And a gun, I don't know if it was 22 or a rifle, but it backfired and it took out his eye.
Guess that's why Dad had us pray before deer hunt on Sunday.
The other thing that Grandpa did, I mean, he was a stickler about was, as kids, if you were running with sticks or anything like that, boy, he'd nab you by the nape of the neck and tell you, you don't do that. That's an easy way to poke out an eye. I think he was always not only self-conscious about that, but fearful of someone else having to experience.
Was it
What
his
he
right
did.
eye? I'm guessing.
Yep, that's right.
Grandpa hated with a passion for anybody to come up on his right side. And even if you just said, "Hi, Grandpa," it scared him. He was always fearful that something over here was going to happen. And so he was always afraid about it.
Doug, while you're up, why don't you just go right on to the ranch?
Well,
Unless you
Father,
have questions. Anybody have questions? I just want you to try and glean as much as you can or as you want.
We're enjoying it, I'm enjoying it.
Oh, good.
I was just gonna say the glass eye is down in my mom's cupboard.
We've talked about that.
I can see it.
Is
My
there,
kids-
Bill?
It really is. My kids took me to show and tell. and When I was growing up,
You ever
before my
pop it
dad
in?
built the cupboard for my mom, she actually kept it in the bread drawer.
Oh,
So it was in its little box, but it was in the bread drawer, and my friends would come over just, "Can we open the bread drawer to see the glass?" So it is in my mom's cupboard down there, if somebody wants to.
And Gordon Thomas.
Put it in your Kool-Aid or anything?
No, I tell the kids I'm keeping an eye out. They all look at me like, you got this last night, 'cause her dad had false teeth and they didn't know it till he spit them out.
Gordon Thomas, who is Chauncey Art Nelson. He's Art's boy. Gordon Thomas claimed that at the ranch house, Grandpa would take the eye out and he'd put it right here. And then he'd say, "I can see you." And Richard confirmed what I had heard, but I didn't know it, is that he'd take his eye out,
Right in front of you.
stick it around in the water room and put it back in. And holy mackerel.
hear me.
Got dry.
Got a little dust in my eye. Did he ever scare you with it?
Oh, yeah.
I remember him doing that, and I told Mom one time, I said, "Oh yeah, he used to take it out."
And I think
She
that
said, "Oh,
that was
you
probably
fall
it,
out."
is
He
when
would-
we come out to visit, you know, you and I were like that, and I think that's when we got it.
I know.
'Cause I was asking about if anybody else remembered about the bed on the front porch.
It was
Oh, yeah.
there.
Yeah,
There was a freezer right here and the bed was right there.
to the right side of
On
the
that
porch
side,
as you
yeah.
come out the front door, yeah.
Dusty old pea blanket on top.
Sit on it, lay on it, but don't jump on it.
No, we gotta have it be real. It just takes me. You could hear that
You
from a
could hear
mile away.
Deadly accurate.
And you knew you better be looking for open doors.
That was Dad, wasn't it?
He learned well from Grandpa Thomas.
My grandfather, because of clicking sounds and la-la, they had a big tent by their house. And Grandpa'd call out, "Boys, it's time to go, let's go to work." And he'd come back about 4 or 5 minutes later, throw that curtain open. Now, I'm talking good kitchen matches and good Levi pants. He'd strike that match, throw back the covers and toss the lit match into the bed, and they were either leaving or they were going to get burned and branded. He also, "Boys, it's time to go to work," and he'd come in with a deal of water and just soak those boys and that kind of thing. Hey, don't worry about north, south, east, or west. This is Enterprise, and this is on to the reservoir. Now forget about north, south, east, and west. But right here, to the north of this road, north, this represents the ranch house area, and Grandpa had a field of hay, and he had a garden here, and a field of hay, and a big field of hay. And the commode, the toilet was out here. Marie talked about the animals that you'd play with that were bones. He had trees in the area behind the house, and we'd play under those trees.
Apple trees.
We'd mix water with dirt and make mud and make the best little roads in all the world, and we spent hours doing that. Kenneth and Herbert made go-karts, for the lack of a better word. It was just a long board, 5, 6, 7 feet, no, it was not ever that long. 4, 5, 6 feet long. They'd put an axle under the front and back of that. They'd put boards on the side of it. You could tie a rope to the front left and a rope to the front right. Then Uncle Ken, Herbert sometimes, but he was about my age, so it didn't last very long, would put a fork handle or whatever there and would go running down this path that went from the house to the barn, and we'd have blast. If you wanted to throw a brody, a what? Anybody know what a brody is? That's when you go down the road and you'd pull on one and
A donut.
push with your foot on the right side and do a donut right there. And I think Kenneth probably lost 200 pounds and he only weighed 100 at the time, you know. But those were fun times. The barn, this barn runs east and west, but Grandpa's barn was north and south. Before I get all wrapped up in barns, let me talk to you about Grandma and Grandpa a little bit first. Stay. Choir. We haven't talked about Grandma and choir. She was always in the choir. Okay, we talked about how giving she was. Grandma was 19 years old when this picture was taken. And if I remember right, you said that's your favorite picture. Do you have an 8x10?
I don't have an 8x10, but I have had a 3x5 that I have in an old-fashioned frame.
How did you do
And-
that? I need to learn because I just want to stop crying.
You just pinch your upper lip really hard.
It hurts.
And when Mom was living with me, she would go into the front room and she'd get that picture and she'd take it back with her and just cradle it all the time. So it must have been her favorite picture too. So. But yeah, I have this on the top of my piano with her original violin. She didn't only sing, but she was in an orchestra, a band. And I tried to get that violin fixed so that I could play
If
it,
you look
but
really hard, she's holding on to the violin here. Deward Terry, anybody know Deward Terry? He's in the picture and his hair looks just like the modern day version.
Frankenstein.
Sticks up here about 4 inches and a flat top after the 4.
I got a picture of the board just back there.
But it was well worn. They couldn't even repair it, so it's just a showpiece at the house. But she not only had a beautiful alto voice and sang in the ward choir as long as I remember, you know, until she was
This
taken
is
to
another
rest home.
pose of that same dress and necklace, I think. But do you want that?
Yes,
You
sir.
don't give it to one of
Yes,
your
sir.
friendly brothers.
Uh-huh.
This one, because it looks the way it does, it's been blown up from a picture about this size to this size, and so it's lost its effect there. Whew. This is the grandma I knew. And I've got older pictures, but I don't want to remember as old. I want to remember as grandma. Now, Grandma and Grandpa, come on up. This represents the pickup truck, or car, or whatever. They had their first date July 24th of 1927. Is that right? A month later, they're sitting in the pickup or car, and they're talking about Orpha. That's my grandma's sister. She's getting married. And Joe is getting married, and James is getting married, and Anita is getting married. And Grandpa said,
I'm gonna get married.
I'm gonna get married. And Grandma said,
To who?
and Grandpa said,
You.
thank you. And Grandma said,
I didn't know what to say about this. Right? Can't say no.
she had no reason to say no, and she said, yes.
Did she
And-
usually sit in the driver's seat too?
You bet. I don't know.
Don't know why.
Their first date was July 24th, 1927, and they were married October the 6th, 1927.
When they come
Now,
back.
69. I was on the mission. I don't know.
October 6th, I think.
I don't know. Steve thinks that Grandpa died on October 6th of then.
It was August because it was summertime. Remember?
If you look in your genealogy, you'll see right there.
Where did my
It was
grandpa
summertime
go?
69,
because
that's
we
the
were
best
all in
I-
shorts on the front.
Again, this is a
lawn.
blown up picture of Grandpa Thomas when he was a young man. And this is the Grandpa Thomas I knew. We haven't talked about, well, we've talked about it. He
Go stand
loved
by that young
cattle
man.
and ranching.
If you want to see
Enjoy.
young Grandpa Thomas,
Not even close as Tyler.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, any? Let me see, I don't.
I got Tyler's mission picture and I don't.
And it looks more like it.
Yep.
Let me see that.
And this is Grandpa somewhere in his midlife. Grandpa loved cattle and ranching, and he always told me, be tough like the Beecham boys. Well, I was playing baseball, and I was second base. And this Beecham boy was trying to steal second base. And the catcher threw me the ball, and I whacked down and tagged him in that hard place for boys. And as he was rolling around on the ground, I thought, I'm tougher than a Beecham boy. True story.
thought you know, growing up, you'd always say that. I thought it was the Beach Boys.
Me too.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, my dad would always say that, and I'd be like, the Beaching Boys, they must be buff.
They came to the beach and girls.
Do you want that,
They are
sir?
tough.
Share that one.
Give it to Callie if you're
Oh,
gonna see
okay.
Callie. What the deal is, Callie helped me to revise grandma's name.
Oh, okay.
This one's available. I don't want to give it to anybody because it's blurry, but if you want it, raise your hand.
Right.
Because it's the Thomas reunion, we won't go into Grandma's mom and dad necessarily, but we are. This is Grandpa Thomas's dad. He loved horses. He loved working with horses. You know, what's scraping down in the fields, using the horses to do whatever ranching he did. But the history, the part of the history that I read is that he